Here is an example of the peripheral blood smear kit that we send. Let's see what you'll be receiving and look at its use. But first, what is the final result we hope to obtain? To be able to look with a microscope at properly stained cells found in the blood. And in the present Quick Impressions protocol, those are the cells of individuals presenting with findings that they attribute to long-term COVID-19. Fortunately, hematologists have already identified certain changes in the morphology or shapes of cells affected by long-term COVID-19. So here we begin the process of obtaining an answer to the question, does this participant's peripheral blood smear findings suggest long COVID? And do subsequent such stained smears reflect an effect of the intervention with light that Quick Impressions participants are carrying out? Now that we know why to do this, let's look at how to do this. Before presenting all the items in our peripheral smear kit, how does this get done by a professional in a real lab? Here's a demonstration. Then I'll summarize the key points of the technique.
And as soon as the blood crosses the spreader to a reasonable amount, so 3/4 of the way across, push it out as fast as you can. So you want to be like Usain Bolt in a 100-meter dash, in, out. And again, you can use the bottom slide as a spreader, again, as fast as you can, and just jam the spreader into the end of the slide and your index finger, and that should, you should end up with good slide preparations after that with your thumbnail shape.
Items included in the kit are here presented one after the other. The role of each in obtaining a satisfactory peripheral smear, fit for subsequent staining and microscopic review, should soon become apparent in what follows. Lancets. Here one is uncapped. The Lancet device. Lancet device with a lancet inserted, still capped. A closer view of the lancet with its point. After use, recapped with its cap sideways. The platform created to facilitate this process, made of wood, that's its base. Aluminum foil, slides. Some have frosted ends, others don't, doesn't matter. These are the slides that the peripheral smear blood drop will go on. Those marked with the P are the pusher or spreader slide. They are rounded at their ends. So the corners, as you can see here, are rounded. And at its base, it also is rounded. It has a P to identify it. So that's a slide sitting on the base with the pusher slide nearby. Through the glass slide, one sees that little piece of putty to help keep things stable. Labels are required. Here's a stick-on label, but initially the slides are labeled with pencil. These are the transporting boxes or protective cases to put the slides in for mailing. They slide one on the other and click together. That's where they clip together. We'll see that more in just a moment. Here is a drop of blood that was smeared out using the technique just described. This is 90% ethanol, ethyl alcohol, or bioethanol used for fixation. The vial contains 5 milliliters. Because its entry into certain countries may cause problems, I am told, slides will simply be air-dried before shipping and fixed on arrival in the laboratory. So let's have a look at this special item in the box. What does this do that may be helpful? Well, let's see. On the back, we've got 4 little dots of putty, and that helps stabilize things. You also see that piece of aluminum foil rounding the corner. Okay, we've already placed a slide on here, and that shows us that there's a little dot of putty right here that keeps the slide stable, although it won't move much because it's between these 2 rails. Okay, and then you notice that we've written on here a number 1, which goes that away, and an indication of something passing over that line at 35 degrees. Okay, that's a reminder. Then we have this dot, which is where the dot of blood goes, and about the right size as well. Then we've got a number 2, and number 2 is the reminder that we're going to go all the way over here to where this wooden block stops the progress of the pusher slide. Okay, so that again will look like start at number 1, go and pick up that dot of blood, let it spread out like we showed in the earlier demo, and now we're going to go very quickly all the way to that block. Boom, just like that. Once again with a closer view, so the slide sits on top of all of that, between those 2 rails, and you can take, if you like, a piece of paper towel or a Kleenex, and you can smear that a little bit, like this, back and forth, just to make sure that that slide hasn't picked up any fingerprints and grease. So that keeps things in place. And now again, here is our pusher slide, okay, with its rounded edges. And so we hold that and we start at number 1 and we back up at about 35 degrees until we get into the blood dot, and then we go rapidly forward. Boom. That's it. So let me flatten my hand a little bit below the 35 degrees so you can see that better. So we start at number 1, we back up to pick up the dot of blood, we watch the line of blood that's going to spread north and south like this, and then we rapidly go all the way here to the block. Boom. Okay? Here's the dot, about the right size. Now, we start at number 1, we back up to pick up that, which will spread out. See how it's spreading out? And then we go rapidly to the aluminum covered block. Boom. That's it. Okay, so now let's do this for real. Okay, so here's this device here, and this device we unscrew and we put one of these lancets into the device. We very carefully remove its cap. So now that's armed, if you want to think of it that way. And now we put that in there, and we screw it back down, and we leave it on position 5. Okay, and now we cock the thing. Okay, and boom, boom. So now it's cocked. Okay, and we're going to take and put a couple of these little rubber bands, just to show you how they can be used, onto a willing volunteer's finger here, like this. And that simply should get us, you see, like that, a little more of a tourniquet effect for this finger, so we'll get a good drop of blood. Okay, so now I'm going to poke her finger after wiping it with some alcohol. But before we do that, we don't want to goof up our results. So we're going to first of all use a pencil, and right here on the ground glass part, we're going to write her initials. Now you'll know that you're trying to write on the wrong side if the pencil just doesn't scratch anything. So here we're on the correct side, and we write initials, and then we write a date. And here, this is just kind of a random test, so we're going to put an R for random, okay? So now we're going to place this on our little holder here, and including pushing down on that little spot where it's going to hold it even better. Now, if you push down with your finger, it's worth going over this with a wipe of some form, Kleenex, okay, and now we're ready to go. And our target is that red dot, and so to facilitate that, we'll be picking this up like that once we have a dot started, and we will place that dot right at the right spot, okay? A little bit of alcohol wipe. And again, you may get a drop that's too big, but so just use a part of it. Just get a little drop the size of that ink dot. Give you some idea. Doesn't need to be bigger than that, but it needs to be in that location. So now I'm going to take and put this on her finger, and I'm going to poke, and here comes a drop of blood. So now I'm going to place that right like this. Okay, perfect. I'm going to give this to the subject. Okay, and now here we go with our pusher slide, and we're going to put it so that it's at about 35 degrees, and we're going to quickly, once it has spread, see I started at number 1 and I backed up to pick up the blood. Now we're going to push until we get to this block right here. Boom, like that. So now you can see that there really is actually a smear of blood on there, just like that. It'll still run a bit if I lift this up too long. So now we're going to let it air dry. Nothing succeeds like success. So that is certainly a nice smear, which will have areas that are too thick over here when we look at it with a microscope, just about right from here to there, and probably too thin when we get over there. But that's just what we want. There will be jillions of cells to look at, so we don't worry that the whole slide needs to be covered. And that's it. Air drying now. And the air drying can happen minimum 5 to 6 minutes. It can happen 10 minutes. You can go get coffee. You can go do some groceries. You can go write a paper and submit it to be published. Whatever you want, because this is going to air dry, and then it's going to go into one of these cases to ship back to the lab. So again, that's a pry it up a bit and pry it up, looks like that, to unclick it, slide that back, remove it, and now you can put that slide in there, okay, or I can remove it from there and put it in there, and now it's protected and it's air drying, and eventually we'll go with a cover from this on top of this one. It doesn't touch the slide. You slide it and you click it, and now that slide is in there protected and ready to go in an envelope and get shipped back. But for now, let's let that open up and get air dried, and there you have it. And of course, don't forget to take off those little rubber bands that have very nicely served as a tourniquet. They make a difference. We got a good drop of blood the first go round, didn't need to re-stick. So, thank you very much. So the slide is, with a pencil, adequately labeled. It won't get confused with other slides that may follow. Now, while that peripheral smear is air drying, here are the labels again. There are 5 of them usually in the box that we send along. So let's do a label. So I recopy, usually with a ballpoint pen, what was written or is written on the slide. So here we go, and the date, and any other information that you can squeeze onto there. This is a random sample, so that's what it's going to say. Now, the staining process will sort of mess up this label if we leave it on the slide during the staining. That's not a big deal, but to avoid that and have a nice result, what we usually do is simply stick this very lightly, like that, and that will get the slide correctly identified when it gets back to the lab. But we'll peel off that label, stain the slide, and put it back on later for permanent identification. I think that's about it. So, should you use a new lancet every time that you're going to poke a finger? Well, if it's always your finger and you're doing 2 or 4 pokes, it'll still work, and you probably won't need to change it on any given day. I wouldn't use that for several days in a row. So removing it requires that you not poke yourself when you don't want to. So here's the thing that was covering it up in the first place, and typically you can just pick that up with a sort of sideways poke like that, and now it's protected. You won't hurt yourself, and you now can pull that out of there like that and throw it away. So that was the device. So that can go back in the box. I hope this has been useful for you. It's especially important to get a good result to start the smear at number 1 that you see here, to back up with the slide towards the dot of blood, and to hold that at about 35 or 40 degrees and watch as the blood line smears along the bottom of the pusher slide, and then to push pretty rapidly with sort of a smooth gesture towards the block there at the end. That'll get you a good result. The one we're showing you here looks like a good result. A final word on that pusher slide. The ones that you see here, the top one that has what look like black corners, is where I tried to fake it by putting black marks on the corners to show how the pusher slide has a rounded edge and rounded corners, and that helps it to smoothly distribute the blood. This is an actual one. We also put a P on there to help you recognize it, but let me see if I can show you those corners. They are rounded. Can you see that those corners are actually rounded? And that's how one identifies a pusher slide that you're going to use on any other slide that is sent in your box. And these slide protectors, these little boxes, you have to fiddle with a bit to get them to work for you. But here's a slide in one of these boxes, and we're going to put another one on as its lid. And so you come in somewhere around here, you'll find the spot, and you'll know that it's right because you can now slide it forward until it clicks, just like that. Now that's a pretty solid unit that you can put in an envelope and mail, and the slides will be protected.